Chapter 7. Everyone's face changed at Lo Mingchuan's declaration. All of them, including Yin Biyue, were stunned. Lo Shisheng, what are you saying? He Yanyun cried. Zhang Yangzhe's beard bristled with anger. Don't be ridiculous. Why should you take his place? What does his crime have to do with you? The Peak Lord of Xiling Peak, Cheng Antai, cleared his throat. As Luo Shizhi is the victim, there has to be more to this case for him to speak this way. An explanation must be given for the cause of the crime. So, Luo Shizhi, Shizhi means martial nephew or niece. Cheng Antai hailed from the disciplinary hall and was the current disciplinary elder. He loved logic. As soon as he spoke up, the others present nodded in agreement. Yin Biyue felt like there was something off about Lo Mingchuan today, but he told himself not to worry about it. A legendary assist was never a bad thing. Lo Mingchuan drew in a deep breath and explanation. If he hadn't used the Gara Pupil technique, he would probably never have known the reason behind it at all. But his Shidi was still so young. Yin Biyue's affection was nothing more than temporary dependence. In the future, when he matured, who was to say he wouldn't encounter a girl that he fancied? After all, the harmony between yin and yang was the true proper path. If Lo Mingchuan proclaimed that Yin Biyue was in love with him, would that trap him in the wrong road? Yin Biyue was proud to the bone. He must not want anyone to know about his forbidden feelings. Besides, all of this was Lo Mingchuan's fault in the first place. He bowed his head. It wasn't Shidi's fault, it was mine. Years ago, while I was drunk, I attempted to force myself on him. Shudi only wanted to teach me a lesson. He had no intention to harm or involve anyone else. Everything was my fault. I am willing to take full responsibility for the incident that endangered Kangya's 32 disciples. It was silent in the hall. Attempted to force himself on the boy while he was drunk? What did that imply? He couldn't possibly mean what he was saying. Yin Biyue was the first to fully process what Lo Mingchuan had said, and his eyes bulged. He went from cool and detached to panicked and indignant. Lo Mingchuan, what nonsense are you spouting? The others were flabbergasted. Could what Lo Mingchuan said have been true? Why would Yin Biyue be so furious otherwise? Was he trying to cover it up? To make things worse, Cheng Antai questioned Lo Mingchuan further. Lo Shizhi, this is not something you should say carelessly. Is this really true? All sorts of astonished and uncertain looks fitted around the hall. Zhang Yangzhe, pale and ashen face, pointed an accusatory finger at Lo Mingchuan and sputtered, unable to speak. I am a miscreant and a disgrace to my master and Kangya. I am unworthy to wield this sword. Today here in Qinghe Hall, I submit. So we have this photo on page 63. Of everybody looking shook and this man just like kneeling down and throwing his sword away in this meditation pose. So he said he submits himself to any punishment. Lo Mingchuan said. He banged his head hard on the floor again before he presented his long sword with both hands. This was Chenzhou, the sword Zhang Yangzi had bestowed upon Lo Mingchuan when he first joined the sect as a martial cultivator. It was a work of art that the master swordsmith Yan Qing had spent 10 painstaking years to forge. A true gentleman's sword. At the time, who would have expected Lo Mingchuan was better suited to spiritual cultivation? After Lo Mingchuan's spiritual powers awakened, Zhang Yangzhe didn't want the sword back, so his disciple had kept it. Seeing it now, Zhang Yangzhe was seized with anger. He didn't believe that Lo Mingchuan had done such a despicable thing, but he also knew that his disciple never lied. He was so torn that he couldn't breathe. Yin Biyue wanted to scream even more than Zhang Yangzhe did. How had things turned out this way? Yes, he wanted to be exonerated, but not like this. Why was this the idea you had in mind, protagonist? If this gets out, my chance of becoming the final boss will go up in smoke. Before he could say anything, however, he was interrupted. Liu Qishuang stepped forward and reproached him in a voice full of grief. Shudi, how could you not tell us? Did you think that Xihua Peak wouldn't protect you? Shujia, not now. Your timing is awful, he thought. There is no grievance. I was never a good person to begin with. Yinbi Yue blurted in a moment of panic. Ding! The villainous line, I was never a good person to begin with, has appeared. Conditions met. The halo is now activated. Yinbi Yue was almost moved to tears, just in time. What a life-saving halo. He Yanyun wanted to argue for Lo Mingchuan's sake, but for some reason, when her eyes fell on the young man standing in the center of the hall, she suddenly couldn't find the words she wanted to say. Since he'd already entered the hall, Yinbi Yue had not offered a word of explanation or any change in expression in the face of public accusation and mockery. It wasn't until Lo Mingchuan spoke up that he grew agitated, and his voice rose like he had a secret to keep. I was never a good person to begin with. Who would say that about themselves? He had actually suffered deep grievances, hadn't he? It wasn't just He Yanyun, the same thought surfaced in almost everyone present. Yinbi Yue swiftly noticed something was wrong. The stares directed at him were becoming strange. They glistened with sympathy, pity, and regret. At the same time, the ones directed at Lo Mingchuan had become conflicted and indignant. No, wait, wasn't the halo activated? Why was this happening? What happened to anyone will cry in fear from a single look? Duan Chongshuan stepped forward and stood beside Liu Qishuang. Shushang, he said to Yinbi Yue, are you being threatened? Is this why you don't want to tell the truth? A thought struck Liu Qishuang. When I paid Shudi a visit half a month ago, his hair was black, but now it's white. Isn't that suspicious? No. Stop that train of thought. This is what he's thinking. Before Yinbi Yue could protest, Duan Chongshuan continued, Shujia, don't worry. White hair is mostly a sign of qi deviation. Although our sect leader sealed Shushang's cultivation, he would never lead him down the deviant path. Then he turned to Lo Mingchuan, and Lo Shushang, don't be silly. You're the chief's disciple of Kangya. Your status is high and precious. How can you casually take punishment for someone else? You, Zhang Yangzi exclaimed, absolute nonsense. What Duan Chongshuan said had been a backhanded compliment. He not only criticized Lo Mingchuan's misconduct and reliance on his influence to bully others, but also subtly mocked Zhang Yangzhi as a biased sect leader who, to protect his own disciple, charged Yinbi Yue before the case was fully investigated. Duan Chongshuan even attempted to link Yinbi Yue's hair to him. Every word he spoke hit hard. Sure enough, the gazes of the others grew critical. Just then, the man in Xihua Peak's seat spoke up. Step down, Duan Shudi. He wasn't loud, but his voice carried a subtle power. It spread far and wide like a glacial ice and penetrated the heart of everyone present. Yinbi Yue's eyes traveled to the source of the voice, Junyu. It was Yinbi Yue's first time studying the man. He was clad in a long black robes with crossed lapels free of adornments, and his jet black hair cascaded down his back. His eyes were as sharp as blades, and his lips were as thin and delicate as cicada wings. Even though he sat with a simple poise, he resembled a divine weapon that struck fear into those who dared gaze upon him. Until now, this dour man had only spoken once. When he was silent, he was nearly invisible, yet when he opened his mouth, all took notice. Even Duan Chongshuan and Liu Qishuang mutely stepped back into their places behind them. Everyone quieted down and waited to hear his stance. Zhang Yangzhi breathed a sigh of relief. Thank goodness there was Junyu, who was reasonable and reserved, the deserving pupil of Wei Jingfeng, the eldest disciple of Xihua Peak. Then Zhang Yangzhi watched as the object of his praise turned his head to his page and said, Get my sword. Zhang Yangzhi's sight went dim. The page stepped out immediately. The entire hall stilled. Some time passed, and Zhang Yangzhi cleared his throat and was about to say something to break this uncomfortable silence when the page returned carrying the sword case. All eyes shot towards the vessel, as if trying to see through the aged peachwood. It's all over. Zhang Yangzhu wailed inwardly. Xihua Peak's bad habit was showing itself again, protecting their own in the most unreasonable ways. Wei Jingfeng was gone, but here came Junyu. As if things weren't bad enough, Lo Mingchuan spoke up again. Shufu, every word I said was true. I am willing to take the blame for endangering Kangya's 32 disciples. Zhang Yangzhi really wanted to throw him to Xihua Peak and be done with it, but no matter how much of a scoundrel Lo Mingchuan was, he's been the one that he raised. Zhang Yangzhi sighed and turned to Yin Biyue again. Yin Shizi, has my vile disciple truly wronged you? He asked in a soft voice. Nothing of the sort happened. He got nothing to do with any of this. Yin Biyue was practically on his knees. At last it was the concerned party's time to speak. But in the back of his head, there was almost an unfeeling electronic voice that rang, beep beep, your teammate's IQ has gone offline. Shuping Peak's lord cleared his throat and broke in with his 2 cents. In my opinion, perhaps Lo Shizi had developed an unrequited affection for Yin Shizi. Young people can be impulsive, but no major mistakes were made. Jun Shizi, put your sword away. This isn't anything that can't be solved by talking. Wouldn't you agree? Shiping Peak were experts at making concessions to avoid trouble, collapsing mountains back into molehills. Zhang Yangzhi had always hated that unprincipled, compromise everything approach, but right now he nodded in eager agreement. Yes, that's right. Shiling Peak's lord spoke up again. The private affairs between young people are best resolved among themselves. After all, it would be inappropriate if they were punished severely for this, and the verdict is publicized. The other Peak lords joined in a chorus of agreement. Indeed, indeed. Liu Qishuang pondered the sentiment. She didn't care about Lo Mingchuan, but publicizing this case would be bad for her Shudi's reputation. Naturally, the others arrived at the same conclusion. Junyu set a graceful hand upon the sword case. Almost simultaneously, the resonant hum of the sword echoed deep within everyone's souls. It startled them. Once more, his icy voice rang out. Today's affair ends here. Those present must not divulge any word of it. He turned his eyes towards Zhang Yangzhi. Zhang Yangzhi understood that Junyu was asking for his opinion as a way to let him save face. He reiterated Junyu's words quickly. Yes, please remember, everyone, that the result must not be divulged. Junyu nodded, passed his sword case back to his page, and rose to his feet. Liu Qishuang and Duan Changshuan followed behind him. Yin Biyue watched as his unearned peers approached him, his insides twisting into a giant knot. What should he say? Thank you? But their assist had been way off target. Now it seems that Lo Mingchuan really almost did something to him. But how could he not say thank you? They went above and beyond their duty to help the OG, with whom they barely shared any friendship. Where had a villain gotten such protective peers? God, did he walk onto the wrong set? It didn't take long before Yin Biyue realized he was overthinking things. When Junyu came before him, he couldn't utter a word. Junyu raised a hand from his expansive sleeves and touched the center of Yin Biyue's forehead with his index finger. Clear, cool qi flowed from his fingertips and entered Yin Biyue's chest. Like a gurgling spring, it streamed through his body. The invisible shackles disappeared whenever Junyu's qi touched. Sublime vital qi gushed from Yin Biyue's conception vessel and surged into every limb. It was as if every inch of his muscles had been stretched and every piece of his bone filled with strength. He felt refreshed and invigorated. Junyu had unsealed his cultivation. So, it says that in the footnotes, the lower abdomen area, this is called the Sea of Conception, or the Dantian. To the two behind him, he said, "Take Shudi back to rest." Duan Changshuang snickered. Shuxiang indeed needs to rest after all this. Duan Changshuan snickered. Su Shuxiang indeed needs rest after all this. I will ask for Elder Ning to give Su Shudi a full checkup at once. So Su means fourth. and then Shushang means fourth older martial brother. So this is just saying like their ranking from like youngest to oldest. Yin Biyue was basically hauled out of Qinghe Hall by the pair. The other peak lords also rose to their feet and took their leave. Lo Mingchuan was staring at Yin Biyue's retreating back when a figure blocked his view. Junyu stopped 3 steps away from him and looked Lo Mingchuan in his eyes, pinning him in place. A devastating chill rushed over him. It was a fear akin to teetering at the precipice of an abyss, or sensing deadly blades suspended above his head. He was ready to believe that the sword that could cleave mountains and flatten Kangya was about to burst from its case and pierce his chest. It felt as if he was being tormented in the freezing tundra for 10 years, when in fact it was just a few heartbeats. Eventually, Junyu turned and left. Lo Mingchuan bent down and gasped raggedly for breath. Only then did he notice the cold sweat that had drenched his clothes. He Yanyin watched the exchange from nearby, stupefied. She only dared to run over to Lo Mingchuan after Junyu was gone, but even after several attempts, she still couldn't pull him up. Lo Shishang, she cried frantically. Lo Shishang, are you alright? What's wrong? Zhang Yangzi hadn't moved to stop Junyu. He knew he couldn't, and that no great harm would come to Lo Mingchuan. It was a minor scolding and a major warning. Junyu had shown mercy. Zhang Yangzi breathed a sigh of relief. Thank goodness this mess was over. He was planning on dragging his disciple home to give him a sound beating when he watched said disciple straighten up, run out the door, chase after Shihua's Peak eldest disciple. Let me see Shudi. I have something to say to him. Lo Mingchuan called to Junyu. I'll kill you, you damn death-seeking idiot. Okay, that's hilarious. That is the end of chapter 7. Chapter 8. The administrative hall of Kangya Mountains was a bustling place, and not only because it was where the sect members collected missions orders. Everyone from the north to the south was happy to stop there, to chat, gossip, and expand their network, greatly enriching the social aspect of their different cultivator lives. How did the verdict end up like this? Surely Lo Shishang wasn't in the wrong. What sort of punishment is house arrest for a month? Seclusion means nothing to that guy from Shihua Peak. He can go into seclusion for 6 months without breaking a sweat. On the other hand, Lo Shishang had plenty of responsibilities in Kangya. How will that affect us? It might not have been a preferential treatment for Shihua Peak. I had a good seat at the trial. Lo Shishang ran into the hall with his hair down, holding his swords in both hands. It really looked like he was about to admit fault. A quiet voice piped up. Do you think that the outcome might have affected the Sword Sage's name? At the mention of the Sword Sage, the crowd's voice dropped in whispers. All of a sudden, a boy who's been standing quietly in the corner raised his voice. What do you know? The crowd looked up. Chengxi from the disciplinary hall was the one who'd spoken. Someone slid over and put an arm around his shoulders. Well now, what do you know about it, you little runt? I heard you were part of the group to escort that Shihua Peak guy from the dungeon to the trial. Changxi gazed confidently at the crowd. Yin Shishu is a good person. If you ever met him, you'd never believe the rumors. He was surrounded by a number of eager gossips, so his declaration caused an immediate commotion. Someone pulled over a bench and a cup of tea for Chengxi to sit and soothe his throat. All the better for him to share his tale. Compared to the buzzing outside, Yinbiyue's courtyard on Shihua Peak was much quieter, even if Duan Chongshuan hadn't left. Shushang, this is the medicine Elder Ning prescribed earlier. Drink it while it's hot. Shushang, you're so gifted. Your future is infinite. Don't let that guy get to you. Shushang, if there's anything bothering you, you can talk to me. Yinbiyue, who was in bed sipping his medicine, nearly spat it out. What's going on in that head of yours, Shudi? He cleared his throat. Shudi. I want serenity. And don't ask me who Serenity is, he thought. He never should have questioned the OG's descriptions. In his defense, who would have believed that a noble, elegant young master really was such a chatterbox? No, Shujia has asked me to take good care of you, so I must, Duan Chongshuan declared. Shushang, don't get up. What do you want? I'll grab it for you. Enough, I'm not disabled, he thought. Yinbi Yue sighed heavily. Wu Shidi, I can feel my vital qi circulating smoothly. Besides, Elder Ning said there's no damage to my sea of conception. As for my white hair, we don't have answers just now, so you and Shujia shouldn't trouble yourselves. He trailed off when he caught a sight of Duan Chongshuan's astonished face. Yinbi Yue tensed. Has he gone OOC? Out of character? That was right. The OG would have never spoken this much. He snapped his mouth shut, but it was too late. Duan Chongshuan moved his stool closer to the bed, his face beaming with surprise and anticipation. Shishang, I knew it! I knew you're talkative deep down. Yinbi Yue was appalled. I am not. I don't believe you. Fine. If they must chat, they might as well discuss business. I was in seclusion a year ago when you entered the sect, Yinbi Yue said. We have not crossed paths before now, and I haven't done my duty as a Shishang to watch over you. I must thank you for speaking in my defense earlier in Qinghe Hall. Rather than expressing his gratitude, the speech was more of a probe. Yinbi Yue could understand the actions of Junyu and Liu Qishuang. Those stemmed from the senses of duty as his Shishang and Shujia. Duan Chongshuan was more of a mystery. If he had acted simply because of a peerage, then he was beyond righteous. Why so formal, Su Shishang? Duan Chongshuan said, I still remember your first statement to me, a long one. You sort of ignored me afterwards, but I always knew you were the chatty type underneath. How the heck did we round back to that? Oh, Yinbi Yue remembered now. At that time he said, My name is Yinbi Yue. I entered the sect 2 years before you, and I am therefore your fourth Shishang. I am usually training in the fourth courtyard of this peak. If you encounter any questions in your studies, you may transmit them to me via jade slips. Otherwise, do not disturb me. Did that count as a long statement? It sounded more like, I'm your Su Shishang. Now leave me alone, you son of a witch. Yinbi Yue pressed a hand to his forehead. Is conversation really important to you? Not necessarily, Duan Chongshuan said. His face grew nostalgic. Back home, I had to talk a lot. Nice things, unpleasant things, truths, lies, words others wanted to hear, words of authority and mercy, words I didn't mean. The reason I joined the sect was to find peace and quiet. I wanted to go to the most tranquil place on earth, but it's too quiet here. Da Shishang doesn't say more than 3 sentences a year. He continued in a tragic voice. I counted. He actually spoke 4 to you today. I doubt he'll ever talk again before next year. Shujia doesn't like to say much either. San Shishang talks a bit more, but it's a drunken chatter. Not to mention, he's rarely around. I can't always talk to Shufu's portrait. After all, Shufu isn't dead, so he wouldn't be happy with me if I did. Now I'm even more curious why Shufu took you in at all, Yinbi Yue thought. Duan Chongshuan poured himself a cup of Junshun mist tea. Thank goodness I have you, Su Shishang. Yinbi Yue's mouth twitched. A chatterbox friendship was so simple. Duan Chongshuan poured Yinbi Yue a cup as well. I understand you. Must be feeling pent up after going through such an ordeal. It's natural to want to talk it out to someone, even if you just want to curse the beast in human clothing. Shudi, you're mistaken. There's really nothing between us, Duan Chongshuan sighed. If you don't want to discuss your grief, we can talk about something else. That's right. These are some things that beast gave to you. He was adamant that I mustn't refuse, so I accepted them on your behalf. If the sight of them bothers you, just toss them. Our Shihua Peak has plenty of those already. Yinbi Yue's feelings toward Lo Minchuan were complicated. Back at Qinghe Hall, he'd been so enraged that he'd felt compelled to stab the man's crotch with his sword. With his fury now subsided, all that remained was a conflicted knot in his stomach. How out there was Lo Mingchuan's thought process to have come up with that? Young people these days. Yinbi Yue just couldn't understand them. Nevertheless, he he accepted the white porcelain bottle and the spiritual lingzi from Duan Changshuan. Where's Lo Shisheng? Yinbi Yue asked. He left, of course, as if he has any right to see you. Duan Changshuan replied glibly, but that wasn't quite the truth. Lo Mingchuan stood outside Shihua's peak barrier, unable to enter. I wish to see Shudi, he shouted. I'm afraid Su Shisheng has sustained internal injuries from the long imprisonment in Kangya dungeon, Duan Changshuan answered. Oh well, I have 3 rejuvenation pills of the 9th grade. Duan Changshuan took the eagerly proffered porcelain bottle and let out a grin sigh. The dungeon is so dark and cold. I also have Jadefire Ganoderma. Won't you let me see him? Lo Mingchuan said beseechingly. With the pill bottle and the spiritual lingzi in hand, Duan Changshuan waved Lo Mingchuan away. I'll deliver the items for you. Goodbye, Lo Shisheng. On his way back, Duan Changshuan encountered Liu Qishuang, who was descending the peak. Did Lo Mingchuan come by just now? She asked. I didn't let him in, Duan Changshuan said, as if he could walk through the door so easily after harming Su Shisheng like that, and I couldn't let him get off without paying a price either. Liu Qishuang nodded in silent agreement. I'm off to speak to Da Shisheng regarding this matter. Take care, Shudi. She was gone before Duan Changshuan could say more. Yinbi Yue frowned. Lo Mingchuan's actions didn't make a lick of sense. First he fabricated such an outlandish excuse, and now he was giving him gifts, as if he had really done Yinbi Yue wrong. Ugh, no way. When Liu Qishuang showed up at Yinbi Yue's courtyard, she found him frowning, his eyebrows knitted together. Shudi, I checked the records in the library, she said. Your hair turning white may be suspicious, but there is a good chance for a cure. You need not to worry. Then she raised a hand to stop Yinbi Yue from rolling out of bed. He groaned in exasperation. Sujia, I'm fine now. She shook her head in disapproval. The dungeon is a unique structure that's harmful to prisoners. If you don't take care of your recovery and damage your spiritual meridians, as a result, you'll encounter difficulties in your future cultivation. It's better to stay in bed for the next few days. Yinbi Yue couldn't argue with that. Rest well. See Da Shisheng after you are fully recovered. Duan Shudi and I shall not bother you, she concluded. Yinbi Yue nodded. Thank you for your concern. Take care, Shijia. Wu Shudi. Duan Changshuan looked like he wanted to chat some more, but after a glance at Liu Qishuang, he quietly filed out with her. Yinbi Yue rose from his bed. He had already entered the state of spirit concentration, so simple meditation could substitute for sleep. In the past, the OG had practiced daily with the sword in the peak's cold pool. He trained while the sun was out and retired to the tranquility room to meditate at night. It's been a long time since he last stepped foot into the bedroom. Besides, his vital qi was humming smoothly. There was no way to put it. It was probably the medical cultivator Elder Ning, who was unable to find the cause for the white hair, but, cornered by Liu Qishuang's relentless questioning, had muttered something to the effect of emotionally repressed, in need of more bed rest, and refrain from brooding. What nonsense. How could she believe that? It was just an unconventional hair color. He didn't care at all. What's wrong with being a quiet shaman boy? Yinbi Yue walked out and studied his small courtyard, white-walled and gray-tiled. Its layout and decoration were simple without any unnecessary adornments. Facing south of the entrance of the courtyard overlooked Tianshin Cliff, where the far distant dots of the green pines and cedars could be spotted in the swirling sea of clouds. A barrier had been cast on the entrance gate that prohibited unwelcome guests and blocking spiritual prying. He struck it with his vital qi. Instantly, the barrier rippled into an intricate pattern that formed images of the 8 gates and 9 palaces of Qimen Dunjia. They spun in endless spirals. If an intruder attempted to force entry, the barrier would use the momentum of their attack and rebound it on them. So, footnote, it says this is basically a specific pattern that will give you like energy. So, it is from Taoism. Yinbi Yue vaguely recalled encountering similar techniques in a Shansha world he had once transmigrated to. It would appear that the OG knew some spiritual arts in addition to his sword. Transmigrating so many times had its benefits, like enriching his knowledge. There were many similarities to be found across experiences. He pushed open the door to the tranquility room and immediately felt every fiber of his being tense. Sharp chi loomed just out of range. Gathering himself, he stepped inside, although this place was for meditation and not where he practiced the sword-cutting sword chi, filled the room. As Yinbi Yue walked around, an enormous pressure poured in from every part of the room and pressed down on him. The tranquility room was split into an inner and outer chamber. The outer chamber was more like a study. A desk with brushes and inkstones stood in the center, and along the east wall was a floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with scrolls of jade's lips and stitched books. A short divan peppered with meditation cushions was installed against the wall in the inside chamber. Yinbi Yue closed his eyes and concentrated so he could feel the flow of the vital qi in his room. Sure enough, there was an array here as well. If anyone were to attack the barrier on the entrance gate during his meditation in the tranquility room, he could strike at the array here, which would transmit his attack to the main gate. When Yinbi Yue had first joined Xihua Peak, many who were dissatisfied with his presence had come to challenge him to a fight. He had cleverly remained in his room and knocked them down the mountain without stepping a foot outside the door, a feat as straightforward as it was arrogant. With how many he offended, it was no surprise that as soon as he landed in trouble, they lined up to kick him while he was down. As he sat on the meditation cushion, Yinbi Yue's confusion only deepened. The sword intent suffusing this place was indomitably honed. Why would someone so immersed in cultivation want to kill Luo Mingchuan? Was it just really jealousy? He couldn't be sure for the moment, but he didn't want to bother wasting time just trying to discern the OG's mind. He had more important business at hand. He gripped the sword hanging at his side. The sword had been confiscated when he entered the dungeon, but Junyu's page had returned it to him after the trial. When he saw the sword for a fleeting moment, he felt it far more terrifying than the sight of Junyu's peachwood sword case. It was a solid black weapon, uncarved and unornamented, of about 3 feet and 2 inches. Despite its thinness, it was deceptively hefty. There was no sheen to the metal when it was drawn from its sheath, and when Yinbi Yue injected it with his vital qi, it remained as useless as a mud ox in the sea. The sword refused to recognize him. It was very strange. Could a spiritless sword recognize its master? He was a martial cultivator, a sword cultivator at that. Even if he retained his cultivation level, without the ability to wield his sword, he was no different from a child who had inherited a mountain of treasure but knew nothing of it. That was his present, most pressing problem. Whether it was his bleeding heart protagonist with an incomprehensible mind, his clearance sale Shufu, who existed only in legends, or his protective peers, who seemed to have walked onto the wrong set, they all had to step aside to survive this world and become the ultimate villain, not just a cannon fodder who wouldn't live past the transition scene. He needed power. End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9. Xihua's Peak's numbers were few. Apart from the ever-locked chief courtyard belonging to the sword sage, there were 5 courtyards scattered about the peak. They went in order, beginning with the first courtyard of Junyu, the eldest disciple. The architectural style and size of the building was entirely up to the owner. The peers Yinbi Yue thought of as misplaced actors were currently gathered in Junyu's courtyard for a meeting. Junyu's residence was even more basic than he was. There was no extra furniture or decoration, and even the round stool Duan Changshuan used for the assembly was the one he brought himself. Despite calling it an assembly, the others ones were in attendance were Junyu, Liu Qishuang, and Duan Changshuan. The third disciple, Yansheng, was out traveling the world and hadn't been back in the peak for a long time. Were it not for the incident, these disciples probably wouldn't have gathered until the sword sage's return, which might not happen for another 100 years. Flapping his fan, Duan Changshuan started the meeting. I went to talk to Sue today. He was earnest with me and didn't find me a nuisance. I agree that the present Lao Tzu is friendly and courteous, truly a contrast from his usual dour reticence, Liu Qishuang said with a nod. In a way, we are all responsible for what happened. Junyu nodded, though he did not speak. It would appear that Shudi is not glum individual by nature. Liu Qishuang continued. He probably became that way after the shock of what happened with Lo Mingchuan. Duan Changshuan analyzed the case, and the group came to this conclusion. Yinbi Yue usually didn't interact with others, not even with his peers of the same peak. This was a result of hurt caused by Lo Mingchuan. As the Yinbi Yue peers, they blamed themselves for not providing support in a timely manner. Their present, most urgent priority was to consider a follow-up care for Yinbi Yue's trauma. Don't worry, Da Shishang. I will visit Su Shishang's for more frequently to chat with him, Duan Changshuan said decisively. Junyu nodded again. Then, with a hint of line between his brows, he said, "The white hair affliction." His words sounded out of the blue, but the other two understood right away. "I'm worried about it," Liu Qishuang said. "Though there aren't any problems at present, what if there's a hidden issue that remains, that may manifest in the future?" After purification, a cultivator's body was different from ordinary humans and could not be diagnosed with via common sense. Cultivation was an unpredictable process, and bizarre accidents like spontaneous combustion and self-implosion were possible. Manifesting white hair in a short period of time was generally an after effect of qi deviation. Yinbi Yue's cultivation had been sealed during his time in the dungeon, so he could not train. So a little side note, the footnote says Lao means old. So they're saying they used it with Yinbi Yue's seniority. Later on, when Elder Ning examined him, he determined cultivation gone wrong was not the cause of affliction, but he couldn't provide any coherent conclusion other than that. That boy is emotionally repressed. This wasn't a diagnosis, the three believed, especially when Yinbi Yue's condition hadn't improved after taking medicine. The issue could be either big or small. If only Yinbi Yue's appearance was affected, that's no problem. But what if it really did pose a hidden threat to his cultivation path? If danger reared its head in the future, it would be much more difficult to resolve then. Of course, if the sword sage returns, then every problem would cease to be a problem. Unfortunately, no one knew where he was. Junyu was silent. Liu Qishuang spoke up first. "We have to resolve this somehow. If we don't have any ideas, I can take Shudi to Xingshan Temple." The best medical cultivators were at the Buddhist sects. The most renowned of them were Xingshan Temple and Jiekong Temple. Liu Qishuang's suggestion was the last resort. Although Xihua Peak and Jiekong Temple weren't at odds with each other, their relationship wasn't great either, and the journey to Xingshan Temple meant crossing the huge deserts and snowfields. Junyu shook his head. Though he didn't specify what they should do, his attitude was firm. Knowing he had arrived at a decision, the other two didn't say more. Ultimately, Xihua Peak's disciple had the weakest bonds among all of the Kangya Mountains. Junyu and Liu Qishuang spoke few words, as they were often immersed in their cultivation. Although Duan Changshuan was talkative, he joined the sect late and felt too shy to bother them. Furthermore, the third disciple Yanxing rarely returned, and the Sword Sage hadn't returned for a long time himself. However, when they had someone in common to protect, the tactic understanding born of their peerage required few words. It felt right, and it warmed Duan Changshuan's heart. It was as if he was closer than ever to his elder Shu Xiong and second Shu Jia, who usually felt out of reach. If sect leader Zheng Yangzhe knew what Duan Changshuan was thinking, he'd slap his thigh in anger. What in the tarnation is tactic understanding born of peerage? Protecting your own is such a Xihua Peak creed, like master, like disciples. Ugh. Zheng Yangzhe casted a glance at Lo Mingchuan, who was kneeling outside the hall, and sighed. "It's getting chilly," he said to He Yanyun. "Tell your Shushang to come inside." Lo Mingchuan walked in and knelt in front of Zheng Yangzhe. "Shufu." Zheng Yangzhe had calmed down since the trial. Thinking back on it, he knew that his disciple he had raised, and this was probably a case of Lo Mingchuan taking the blame on himself. When Zheng Yangzhe first conferred Lo Mingchuan the title of Kang Ya's chief disciple, the future sect leader, it was his sense of responsibility that Zheng Yangzhe had valued as much as his talent in cultivation. A sect leader didn't have to have the highest level of cultivation, but he must have a sense of responsibility. The excessive sense of responsibility seemed to have become Luo Mingchuan's burden. Zheng Yangzhe felt quite helpless to assist his disciple. Take the trial, for example. Zheng Yangzhe had told the public Yin Biyue had no intention to cause harm to anyone. He was compelled to do so under the bewitchment of a demonic cultivator. Lo Mingchuan acted rashly to punish him, resulting in Yin Biyue's imprisonment before he could explain his circumstances. Both were at fault, and therefore both will be punished with house arrest. Had Zheng Yangzhe allowed the reason his disciple supplied to be publicized, it would have been an indelible stain on his reputation. Fortunately, with the presence of Junyu's sword, no one who'd been present in the hall would dare run their mouths. The sword, Chun Shan Xiao, was one Wei Jingfeng had left Junyu. The aging sect leader rubbed between his brows tiredly. If the sword were to be drawn, even he would jump to avoid its edge. When is the sword giver coming back to discipline his disciples? Could he have forgotten the existence of the Kangya Mountains in this world? Then, as if memory had bitten him, Zheng Yangzhe thought, never mind, it's best that he doesn't return. Zheng Yangzhe helped his kneeling disciple to his feet. I will not force you to tell me the real cause behind your actions. I am simply angry that your execution lacked consideration. Have you thought what the consequences would have been if I allowed you to speak in front of all of Kangya? Not everything is your fault, nor does everything require you to bear responsibility. Kangya is the weight on your shoulders. Kangya should be your primary concern. He gazed at his disciple, who had grown taller than him, and sighed once more. After all, in all 100 years, I will be passing Kangya to you. Lo Mingchuan lowered his head. This disciple is very sorry. Zheng Yangzhe waved, dismissing him. Never mind, you can decide how you wish to resolve this issue. Yan Yun, you are dismissed too. Young people had their own paths to walk. He was glad he was living long enough to watch over them for a part of their journey. Recently, Yin Biyue had been practicing the sword, like a man-eating beast was hot on his heels. Worried that the others would find something amiss about him, he stayed inside his little courtyard to train for a whole month. The OG's sword technique remained in his memories, but the sword refused to accept his vital qi. He could not utilize the extent of the sword's strength. rendering it no different from ordinary metal. This problem was as suffocating as a blade swinging by thin wire over his head. Today, he was determined to find another way, or at the very least, a way to hide the issue. Just then, a knock came from the front gates. The chatterbox's voice drifted in. "Su Shishang, I've come to visit you. Su Shishang." With his sword in hand, Yin Biyue went to open the door. Duan Changshuan strode in, waving his fan, then gave Yin Biyue a once-over. "How have you been feeling these days, Shishang? Do you feel unwell anywhere? Have you been taking your medicine on time?" "Oh yeah, I've been taking my meds every day. God forbid I miss a dose," he thought. "I'm fine. Don't worry about me," Yin Biyue said aloud, appearing unruffled. He only tolerated the medicine so his second shujia and the chatterbox wouldn't worry. The truth was, the chamois hair color didn't affect him at all. He wasn't stressed about it. Duan Changshuan stared at him like he was waiting for more. When Yin Biyue showed no signs of continuing, Duan Changshuan rubbed his nose and attempted to start a new conversation. "I see you're practicing your sword. Su Shishang, your technique is exceptional. I had the honor of witnessing your craft when I first joined the sect, and it shook me to the core. Even now, I cannot forget. Please don't ask me to demonstrate it. I'll give myself away in a heartbeat," Yin Biyue thought. He shifted the subject slightly left. "When it comes to exceptional technique, who of Kangya can match Da Shishang? Have him demonstrate for you instead." That day, in Qinghe Hall, Yin Biyue had been puzzled. Why was everyone, including the sect leader, so flustered? Wasn't it strange for everyone to wear a "don't be rash, we can talk this out" expression when Junyu demanded his sword? When he saw the peachwood sword case, it came back to him. The sword was named Chunshan Shao. To forge it, the sword sage had gathered cosmic molten fire, meteoric sand, and Aladdin iron from the West Sea. He then invited the master swordsmith Yan Qing to join him in reforging the ancient divine sword, Lin Yuan, into 2 new swords. The endeavor had taken 3 years. The day the swords were completed, the Kangya Mountains were in the midst of spring. Finding the timing fortunate indeed, the sword sage laughed heartily and clapped. "So charming the green mountains in my eyes. Likewise, I must appear in the green mountains' eyes." Thus the longsword was named Chun Shun Shao, Smiling Spring Mountain, and the short sword was called Qiu Feng Li, the parting in autumn wind. So footnote, this is from a poem called "Congratulations to the Groom, I Am Old and Worn" by Shin Chichi in the Southern Song Dynasty. Junyu held Chunshan Shao to guard Kangya, while the sword sage carried Qiu Feng Li with him as he roamed around the world. If one named the divine weapons of the world, these twin swords were at the top. As soon as Yin Biyue spoke, Duan Changshuan's eyes lit up. The words "Su Shishang, let's chat" were scrawled across his face. Yin Biyue had no intention whatsoever to invite him inside for a cup of tea and conversation. Then a sudden blur flashed before him, and he had to suppress the urge to put a hand to his face. "Is your spatial storage used to carry table, chairs, and stools just so you can chat with anyone anywhere? And snacks and tea? What the hell?" Duan Changshuan shut his fan with a snap and pointed at the stool now set on the ground. "Have a seat, Shishang." Yin Biyue's mouth twitched. In one fluid motion, the chatterbox sat down and started pouring tea. Speaking of Da Shishang's sword technique, Su Shishang, the sect leader versus Da Shishang, who do you think would win? "Bro, are you the head writer for the Kangya Mountains gossip tabloid?" he thought. Nonetheless, he considered the question seriously. The sect leader is of the Great Ascension level. Despite holding a renowned sword, Junyu was only half a step towards the Great Ascension. In theory, the dominance of each cultivation level over the other one beneath it was akin to a heavenly rift. But Yinbi Yue didn't have a deep understanding of the world's level differences yet, so he didn't want to speak rashly. All he knew was that the levels were so divided: qi cultivation, marrow purification, spirit concentration, breakthrough, small, ascension, great ascension, second stage, and the final stage, after transcending the heavenly tribulation, was sagehood. In this world, cultivators who had attained small ascension were already a rarity, their strength sufficient to establish their own sects. Those who reached great ascension were fewer still. As for the 6 second sages, they stood at titans whose influence shaped the fabric of the world. Each reigned over their own domain and seldom emerged. And among all of them, one sage stood at the apex. But cultivation level isn't the same as one's combat strength, Duan Changshuan said. Martial cultivators often exceeded their cultivation levels during battles, so it's hard to judge. It's true that Da Shisheng is only halfway to great ascension, but what? Yinbi Yue was now interested. Apparently, 3 years ago, when Da Shisheng was out traveling, he encountered a Sylvan Grandmaster upon a desolate mountain in the Great Ascension level. The Grandmaster coveted his sword, and a bloody battle ensued that lasted for 5 days. In the end, the Grandmaster was forced to flee. He ran for 3,000 miles, but Da Shisheng chased after him, cleaving hills and boulders asunder, until the old man was the one to fall. Yinbi Yue quickly covered his surprise to stand up to someone who had reached the Great Ascension, when he was only halfway there. What a terrifying combat power. But you know how it is with the rumors. Even the truthful parts are exaggerated, Duan Changshuan continued. Da Shisheng really is very strong. He had an unnamed sword at the time, not Chun Shan Xiao, and even then he wielded that sort of power. Sounding regretful, he said, "Truth be told, I've never seen Da Shisheng use Chun Shan Xiao. I have no idea what the sword even looks like." As the golden sun sank in the western horizon, enveloping Kangya in the dimming colors of the twilight for hundreds of miles, the faint cries of crows retiring to their nests floated in from the distance. In a blink of the eye, the pot of Ban Shan Sorrow's tongue tea had been emptied. Duan Changshuan suddenly slapped the table. "Oh, that's right. All this talk of Da Shisheng reminds me at the last meeting. He said we should gather together when you've got the time. It's getting late today. Why don't we head over tomorrow?" "Have you only just remembered the actual business now? Isn't it late because you've been talking all this time?" he thought. Resigned, Yinbi Yue nodded. "Okay." After sending away the chatterbox, Yinbi Yue stood alone in the yard. The waning sunlight stretched his shadows across the ground, and in the distance the fading sun gilded the rolling sea of clouds. The misty mountains were breathtaking to behold. He lowered his head to gaze at the sword in his grip, his fingers subconsciously rubbing the hilt, as he thought back to the power emanating from the sword in Qinghe Hall. The next day, Yinbi Yue couldn't make it to the meeting after all. A greenfinch bearing a letter had landed outside his courtyard early in the morning. The letter was written in proper Taiga script, using the deep water ink from the Hui prefecture, upon thin cloud paper. Even its wording was formal. "The Lanyuan Academy invites your excellency for a visit. We eagerly wait your arrival. Sincerely, Headmaster Xian Chang." So we got 2 footnotes. The first one was for Taiga script. This was a formal calligraphy style that was prominent for the brief period during the Ming Dynasty. And then the next one is for Xiansheng, which is a respectful way to address a man who was born earlier or is like a teacher level. Though exquisite, an invitation of such caliber could be composed by any prominent clan. The difference was the stamp at the end of the letter. It wasn't the Academy's emblem of a brush entwined with a flower, signifying literary excellence, but the stamp of the headmaster's personal seal. Lanyuan Academy stood at the neutral power among the One Mountain and three Taoist sects, the twin Buddhist temples, and the demonic 12 palaces. However, the academy's shadow influenced all of them. The current leader of Baopu sect alone had once studied at the academy. The abbot of Jiakong Temple had once taught there. In fact, many of the pillars of major sects were former students of the school. Even a number of prominent officials in the court of the northern imperial capital were graduates of Lanyuan Academy. But most importantly, the academy's headmaster was one of the six second sages of the world. To have such a titan personally stamp an invitation was extraordinary indeed. Duan Changshuan clicked his tongue in amazement as he examined the letter. Such spiritual ability, as expected as the second sage, Su Shishang. Do you think the array cast in this letter can transport two people? Why don't we bind ourselves as one and go together? Yin Biyue struggled to keep his mouth straight. Are you stupid? No way. Taking a tag-along when teleporting, you'll be ripped apart in a heartbeat. He took the invitation back and studied its contents. Though the wording appeared polite, there was no indication of a meeting time. The meaning was clear: depart immediately upon receipt. One of the cultivation ward's crude saying, when it came to Yin Biyue's mind, the Kangya Mountain's tyranny is the real deal. I'll beat you till you submit. I'm reason itself. But Lanyuan Academy's obstinance is just as real. Their pleases and thank yous are fists. Yin Biyue rubbed the palm-sized stamp with his thumb. The red ink was slightly raised, its texture smooth and delicate to the touch. The seal itself was generically engraved with the words, Personal Seal of Headmaster Shen Sheng. Duan Changshuan watched beside him, worried that he would disappear at any moment. The headmaster's stamp contained an array that opened a spatial passageway upon injection of vital qi. Lanyuan Academy was located in Yunyang City of the central continent, while the Kangya Mountains were in the western continent. More than 1,000 miles existed between them, but with the array, travel would be instantaneous. Yin Biyue couldn't think of why the Titan, like a second sage, would want to see him. The inane reason Duan Changshuan proposed, that the headmaster would request he delivered a lecture at the academy because he had graduated with top marks, sounded impossible. In the 3 years he studied at the academy, he hadn't even known where the headmaster lived. The deputy headmaster and the teachers had handled all the academy affairs, whether big or small. Headmaster Shen Sheng seemed like a legendary existence. Well, no point in dwelling on things he didn't understand. He had to meet the man regardless. He nodded curtly. I'm off, Shidi. Duan Changshuan pressed close. Su Shishang, you really won't consider bringing me along? Hey, Shishang, Shishang? His cries were still echoing in Yin Biyue's ears when, in a flash, he found himself in a foreign land. Shallow puddles pooled around the blue tiles on the ground, and the air was cool and damp. The sky was clearing. Rain had just passed through Yunyang City. Yin Biyue glanced down at his own shadows to determine the time difference between the two continents. He was standing within the vermilion gate of the academy. Before him was a gigantic air of magnificence. Beside the stone stood a red-robed young boy with his hair tied in 2 loops. At the sight of Yin Biyue's appearance, he cupped his hands in a salute. Please come with me, Shishang. Shen Sheng is waiting for you. Rather than a residence, the academy could be considered a city within a city, mainly because of its sheer size. Circling past the established stone was the grand main avenue of the academy. It extended far into the distance, leading to the Hall of Diligence, where the students gathered. The avenue and the main hall were empty, as it was school hours, and the students were in their respective classrooms. Beyond the Hall of Diligence, the path diverged into complex smaller routes. Some were winding corridors that wrapped around the academy's many buildings, while others were long blue-tiled roads, branching off in every direction. Yinbiyue walked down the road that the OG had traversed countless times. Massive black locust trees, their trunks as wide as 3 men, canopied the path. Green vines sprawled across the walls of the 4-story library. Everywhere Yinbiyue looked, he saw vibrant green. The corridors connected the classrooms were lined up with weathered red pillars, their surfaces mottled, and the flecks of the peeling paint revealed darker hues beneath. The breeze sweeping across the academy carried the refreshing fragrance of greenery and the sonorous voices of students reciting their texts. The scenery here was both familiar and foreign. What did Lanyuan Academy teach? Everything from calligraphy, painting, and mathematics to prose, lyrics, and musical scores. Not to mention introduction to cultivation, hundreds of schools of thought, the beginnings of the universe, and political mind games. Headmaster Shen Sheng once said, "The pursuit of each path has its sequence, but one does not hold superiority over another. Of the 3,000 paths in the universe, all led in the same destination." This was the guiding creed of the academy. The boy led Yinbiyue through another archway and smiled. "It's been a few years since you graduated, Shishang. Do you still remember the way around here?" "Of course, I walked these paths thousands of times, but even though I was a student here, I'm ashamed to admit I do not know Shan Sheng's name." He assumed that the boy was a headmaster's servant and could therefore supply him with the headmaster's name. That way, he could address the headmaster properly when they meet. "No one really knows Shan Sheng's name," the boy said. "I imagine he doesn't remember it himself." Yinbiyue blinked in surprise. Just as the world dares not to speak the sword sage's name, has Shan Sheng really forgotten his own name with the passage of time? The boy puffed up his chubby cheeks and pursed his lips, looking conflicted. He seemed innocent and spirited. It was apparent that the headmaster treated those around him with gentleness, at least on the surface. "Not exactly," the boy said. "Shan Sheng is someone very senior, so everyone in the world, no matter how distinguished, has to address him that way. At the same time, he's generous, so no matter how poor or lowly you are, he allows everyone to address him this way. Eventually, his name no longer is important. To Shan Sheng, the common people are all equal." The common people were all equal? A faint smile surfaced on Yinbiyue's face. Now those sounded like the words of a true sage. To him, there were mere ants beneath his feet. Each ant was equally small from his vantage point. With an expression as calm as water, he followed the boy to the circle around the library and headed deeper into the quiet and secluded depths of the school. He was one step behind the boy, but when they rounded the corner, the boy vanished. Yinbiyue continued his confident stride forward, however, and did not panic. This entire school was the headmaster's personal domain. Here the movement of every petal and leaf, every bird and beast was within his grasp. Nothing could escape his notice here, not even Yinbiyue losing his way. He walked past the martial arts training hall, where young men practiced their sword with a singular focus. Though youthful in appearance, their eyes were resolute. Beads of sweat trickled down their foreheads and rolled down the collars. He paused outside the hall of debate. 2 groups of students inside were locked in a debate stalemate, their faces flush red all the way down to their necks as they glared at each other. He watched the students hurrying to and fro inside the library, their figures a blur through the window. Their arms were stacked with books and scrolls, and their strides steady and confident. Students in their prime of their youth. He recalled 2 peculiar courses: Debate and Introduction to the Art of the Sword. Their teachers had been famously strict, When he first entered the school, others whispered, "He's so young, can he manage to graduate?" Then they watched helplessly as he climbed to the top spot in both courses. He had spent many nights studying, many mornings rising early to practice the sword, and many evenings climbing the high towers to watch the sunset. Yinbiyue had never been the most gifted, but he had been more diligent than any prodigy. Memories flooded his mind as scenes of the past flashed before his eyes. His life had felt like a long dream, within which he lived through 3 years of joy, anger, and sorrow at the academy. Every day spent in this establishment was engraved in his soul. From the day he spent in the first entrance exam he had nervously taken in the hall of learning, to the wanton singing and drinking of his farewell night upon the orchid terrace. The images stopped at the present, where he was Yinbiyue and Yinbiyue was him. The events of yesterday shaped the me of today. The longsword resonated as the thought stirred in his mind. The blue-tiled floor beneath his feet split into a foot-long chasm of profound depth. Standing stark against the backdrop of the sky, dyed the color of blood by the fading sun. At the same time, under the locust tree, in a secluded yard, a middle-aged scholar in a tall hat and broad belt flashed a smile. "Chi, release, before the sword unsheath, excellent." An entire yard of locust flowers quivered in the breeze in response to his pleasure. Yinbiyue had been so immersed in the sword intent, a mystical feeling that was almost close to instinct, when the scenery before him changed into a yard full of locust trees. Though it was only mid-spring, the trees were in full bloom, their sweet fragrance wafting through the air. Standing beneath one of the locust trees was a singular figure, the master of the academy. Before his meeting with the headmaster Shansheng, Yinbiyue had imagined what kind of person he'd been many times. Most people would be curious about what those who stood at the apex of the world would look like, or what power they emanated. But what he'd pictured couldn't compare with what he witnessed now. He had assumed the headmaster to be an otherworldly, immortal elder. He certainly hadn't expected a middle-aged scholar. A man stood beneath the locust tree, with his hands loosely clasped behind him, like an idle rich man from a prominent house. Even when dressed in formal attire of a tall hat and a broad belt, he felt a little laid back. He had not exuded authority, as the sect leader did, nor did he possess the glaring sword intent of Junyu, or the cutting aura of a martial artist found in Liu Qishuang. Nonetheless, Yinbiyue didn't dare lower his guard. He had a keen intuition for sensing the strength of a soul, and the man before him was formidably strong. In all of Yinbiyue's experiences, assessing others, this man was a rare powerhouse. Yinbiyue took 2 steps forward and stopped at a respectful distance before he bowed, maintaining a disciple's etiquette. This student greets Shensheng. The idle rich man waved, indicating that formalities weren't necessary. What he said in the next second heightened Yinbiyue's alarm to the extreme. He felt his blood freeze, as if he plunged into an icy cellar. The man sighed, a little rueful, then grinned. "Don't worry about not being able to kill him." What? Okay, that's the end of chapter 10. Oh my gosh, theories. Is he evil? Well, that would make sense. That's crazy. You know what this reminds me of? Wicked. For some reason, I was thinking of the Wicked movie and how they had like all these strange corridors and like all these little lessons and stuff. And then also the evil headmaster. Potentially. Maybe. I didn't think it would go like this. My theories before this and like seeing how he's going to meet the headmaster was like, oh, he's so smart that he's going to find out that he's not from this world. Like, he's not the same soul. So that's what I thought it was. I don't know. We'll have to see if he's evil or like if there's something going on. But Yeah, I was like, so far it's very light and peaceful, so now we're getting the plot going, I guess. Chapter 11. Yinbi Yue had to summon every ounce of willpower to keep his expression neutral. He dropped his head respectfully, like any pupil receiving guidance. He had to stay placid as a lake. Even the smallest change that exposed his racing thoughts would not escape Shansheng's eyes. The him Shensheng spoke of obviously meant Lo Mingchuan, so it had been the headmaster Shensheng who'd ordered Yinbi Yue to kill? Why did he want Lo Mingchuan dead? Hadn't Lo Mingchuan had also studied at the academy? With his cultivation level, Shensheng had 100 ways to kill Lo Mingchuan. Why use Yinbi Yue? To compel a second sage to plot secretly, was the ultimate target Lo Mingchuan, or was it Kangya sect? But the academy had been neutral for years, not to mention, had a strong friendship with Kangya. Furthermore, the sword sage and Shansheng were good friends. Could it be there was something unique about Lo Mingchuan? When was the ordered issue? After Yinbi Yue first entered the academy? Or when he joined the sword sage? Did the sword sage know? Yinbi Yue felt like an insignificant pawn in the hands of titans. If this had happened to anyone else, they'd be seized by terror. But when Yinbi Yue came to his senses, his mind was filled with a practical question. Hey, what about my promised final boss arc? Why is there a stronger boss above me? Who put the giant mountain in the villain's camp? What do I do now? As I suspected, leveling up is the only way to the top. We shall let this matter go for now. Do not trouble yourself within the future, Shensheng said. He pointed at the rattan chair beside him. Come, have a seat. At least Yinbi Yue needn't to think about killing Lo Mingchuan for a long time. He politely took a seat. This segment of his memories were blank, but judging by the situation, his past interactions with Shensheng had been relatively peaceful. Shensheng sat down in one of the rattan chairs as well. A few locust blossoms had alighted upon a stone table before them, landing beside a slightly worn black glazed tea set. You've come just in time to join me in stargazing. It had been early morning when Yinbi Yue first arrived, but when he entered this mysterious realm, it was dusk. Now the dregs of daylight were fading away. In about a cup of tea's time, the first stars would be visible in the night sky. Indeed, everything was within Shansheng's control. First, water you brought to boil, and the vessels were heated. Next, the tea cake was carefully broken apart, and the leaves sprinkled into a pot. Once the steaming water was added and the tea was poured, Shansheng swirled each cup. Waves of pristine pale liquid swished against the glazed black walls of the vessels, their contrasting colors blending rather than clashing. Shensheng moved with fluid, carefree grace, yet he was methodical and precise in his actions. This was probably what the Confucius meant by following one's heart's desire, without overstepping the universe's boundaries. Yinbi Yue watched attentively. How many people in the world would dare to imagine being served tea brewed by the headmaster? I got it for free, so I guess this is the benefit of working for a big shot, he thought to himself with amusement. Wordlessly, they sat beneath the locust tree, enjoying the taste of tea. The situation wasn't developing as he had first expected. The residual reaction of the OG's body didn't raise his hackles against Shensheng. Before Yinbi Yue realized it, his agitated heart has calmed, and his distracting conjectures dispersed. For the first time since coming to this world, his taut nerves relaxed amid the fragrance of tea. He picked up the cup and swirled it in his hands. The faint shimmer of stars were reflected within. Shensheng closed his eyes in pleasure, finished his cup, then gazed upon the sky. Thick clouds had drifted across the moon, obscuring its glow, which only served to heighten the brilliance of the stars. You must know, stars do not move as slowly as our eyes perceive, Shensheng said with a twinkle in his eyes. Some are very fast. Yinbi Yue was taken aback. He glanced up again, only to see the same tapestry of silent stars. This was when he knew they were not seeing the same thing. He couldn't fathom how the world appeared through the second sage's eyes, and any more than a mayfly knew the size of the world, or a summer grub in the chill of ice. In all that he'd lived through, he had never peered across billions of miles to behold the universe and the orbit of stars. Shifting to a more comfortable position in his chair, Shansheng watched with great relish. Soon after, he once again shattered Yinbiyue's breadth of understanding. The golden-necked dragon and the winged fire serpent were 3 gangs sanjiang. So that says it's approximately 10 feet apart last year. He said with a deep sigh, "They should be aligning about now." Golden-necked dragon and winged fire serpent were constellation names, one in the east and one in the south. Ganges sand was a unit of measurement in Buddhism, approximately 10 to the power of 52. Squinting, Shansheng murmured under his breath, his eyes fixed on the sky. Yinbiyue could barely catch fragments of colossal numerics, on units like Jian and Ji, and Nayuda. As it's connecting 2 dots together, Shansheng lifted a finger and swept it across the sky, a sage's divination. It wasn't a matter of mystical perception of a spiritual sense, but real calculations, drawing from their immense reservoir of knowledge, their unique computational methods, and their terrifying capacity for reckoning. They would arrive at their outcome after dedicating an extended period to measurements and logic. Yinbiyue was profoundly shaken. To learn fate through observation of stars, what did Shansheng see? The man in question set down his teacup and smiled faintly. "It's time for you to leave Kangya. Southward is best." The pot of tea was done. The night breeze picked up, stirring the faint sweetness of the lingering tea's fragrance and locust blossoms in the air as it dispersed, the thick clouds in the sky. The bright moon emerged, breaking free of its cover. Silvery white light beamed down and spilled across the mortal earth from the distant heavens. At the same time, the brilliant stars dimmed. There were a few so small in size that Yinbiyue could no longer see them. As the shimmering stars faded, when the moon rose, so did the smile on Shansheng's face, retreated behind the thin folds around his eyes. He began to clean up the tea set. Tonight's stargazing session has come to an end. Yinbiyue rose to his feet and dusted away the locust petals gathered on his robes. He cupped his hands in a salute, performing a disciple's courtesy one more time as farewell. Leaning against the rattan chair, Shansheng nodded. Yinbiyue fished out the invitation from his sleeves and activated the array. His form rippled like water before vanishing from the small yard, leaving a sole figure behind. Even with the radiant moon as company, he seemed somewhat lonely. The scholar gazed back at the solitary night sky. "You must know," he murmured to himself, his expression shrouded. "The moon is also a star." Except the star was too bright, and no one dared to challenge its radiance. A sigh seemed to echo through the empty halls of the academy. Yinbiyue landed back into his own courtyard on Xihua Peak, the same spot he had left that morning. The invitation in his hands crumbled into dust and dissipated into the night. The Academy one-day travel pass really is a single use, he thought, looking back at his hand ruefully. Here I thought I might have a spiritual device that allowed me to travel to the Academy at will. Who knows when I'll reach that cultivation level? To fabricate a device that allows others to traverse a space of countless miles was no small feat. Yinbiyue didn't notice that what he'd wondered was when he would attain the stage of second sage. Not if he could attain it. Among 100 cultivators in the spirit concentration state, maybe 40 of them would think about how to attain the breakthrough state. 20 of them would think about how they would attain the small ascension, and of them 5 would try to picture the great ascension, what it was like. But almost no one would attempt to contemplate the cultivation of a sage. He didn't dwell on any of that. The present him believed it was enough to train diligently. There was no need to ask questions. It was a subconscious confidence he possessed. He wouldn't waste his time on self-doubt or erode his resolve with unnecessary rumination. He gripped the hilt of his sword and lifted his gaze to the sky. Without the cover of Yunyang cities, towering structures, the moon above the Kangya mountain seemed even brighter and clearer. He could hear the rustling leaves of the sea of deciduous trees mingling with the murmurs of the rolling waves of conifers. Every now and then the cry of a partridge would break through the stillness, deepening the emptiness that enveloped the night. He couldn't unleash the sharp sword's intent that boiled within his sheathed sword, the way he had during the day at the academy. That was a stroke of luck, a fleeting feeling his mind attained. Still, it greatly inspired him. He stood in the yard through the night. By the time dawn broke, morning dew had soaked him entirely. Yet his eyes shone brighter and brighter. He had found the way to wield his sword. Chapter 12. Although Yinbi Yue hadn't slept, he was energetic at the next day. He stood straight and steadfast, with vivid, lucid eyes. Liu Qishuang was glad to see him in such good health. It seems Shudi is feeling better. Thank you for your care, Shujia, Yinbi Yue said with a nod. He next turned to Junyu and Duan Changshuan. Thank you, Dashishang, Wu Shudi. His gratitude was for the dungeon visit and protection they gave during the public trial. Although Liu Qishuang and Duan Changshuan's assistance had spiraled in the wrong direction, it had worked out. Seeing the earnest look in Yinbi Yue's eyes, Li Qishuang felt a twinge of guilt. She hadn't done her duty as a shujia in the past, and she hadn't helped much this time either. In spite of this, even after all the hurt, Yinbi Yue still thanked them. He truly had an excellent temperament. The meeting took place in Jun Yu's first courtyard, with the tables and chairs and benches provided by Duan Changshuan as usual. After extending his gratitude to his peers, Yinbi Yue turned his eyes on Junyu, knowing that the elder Shushang must have had something to say. Junyu exuded a frigid aura as he sat with his back straight as a brush, as if he might have unsheathed his sword at any moment's notice. Gazing at his two shudi, he said, "In 3 months, Mount Chongming's flower-picking tournament will occur. You two shall go." His voice sounded raw and stiff, probably because he didn't speak often. The 1,000-leaf lotus of Ming Lake is known to dispel worries and troubles of the heart, Liu Qishuang added. It has also come time for the two of you to travel beyond the peak. Yinbi Yue abruptly recalled Headmaster Shansheng telling him to travel south. Mount Chongming was in the southern continent. Well, that was fast. The flower to be plucked in the flower-plucking tournament was a 1,000-leaf lotus in Ming Lake of Mount Chongming. Over 100 hectares of the lake's surface was canopied by lotus leaves, but there was only one lotus flower that bloomed every 10 years. In a cultivator's long lifespan, 10 years wasn't much, but no one wanted to wait. Because the 1,000-leaf lotus drew the natural spiritual energy abundant on Mount Chongming, in addition to dispelling troubles of mind and heart, it can also purify the physical constitution and improve cultivation aptitude, lying in a solid foundation for an individual's cultivation path. To cultivators of the small ascension level and below, there was no better treasure. The strongest would speak with their strength, climbing to the summit and plucking the flower. This was how Mount Chongming's flower-plucking tournament gained its name. After consultation between the various sects in order to encourage the younger generation, it had been decided that anyone below the state of small ascension and above the state of breakthrough could participate. Once one was past the small ascension state, the flower was of little value, and those below the state of breakthrough could not fully absorb the flower's spiritual energy. Alternately, Hosted by the One Mountain and Three Taoist sects and the twin Buddhist temples, the tournament had developed into a massive competition where young measured their strength. Countless astounding talents traveled thousands of miles to attend this event, not only for the Thousand-Leaf Lotus, but also to make a name for themselves. The tournament was also an opportunity for the major sects to boost their prestige, affirm their status, and test each other. Kangya attended the tournament every time, though Shihua Peak had never participated. Junyu had made the decision to attend in the instance because of Yinbiyue's white hair affliction. Liu Qishuang also thought that the participation at the flower plucking tournament of Mount Chongming was an excellent choice, whether they found a cure or gained experience through travels. None of the Sword Sage's older disciples, Junyu or Liu Qishuang and Yanxing, had attended this grand competition organized specifically for young talents. That might have sounded rather unbelievable, but the reasons were simple. Junyu was the Sword Sage's chief disciple, but the flower plucking tournament hadn't existed when he first made a name for himself. Later, when he emerged from the peak to travel the world, he'd already attained the small ascension state. Not to mention, he only traveled to the most dangerous and remote paths, like the mighty mountains, savage swamps, or the snow plains of the northwest. Very few people had actually seen him during his journey. Liu Qishuang had originally intended to go to Mount Chongming, not to pluck any flowers, but to seek a worthy opponent to sharpen his skills. However, the year she emerged from the peak, she'd run into a revival of Chong Palace, of the 12 palaces and demonic dominion. Thus she joined the sect leader and many of the sect elders and charged up to Shiling Mountains to vanquish evil. Many of those small ascension states perished in the battle, yet Liu Qishuang, who was the spirit concentration state at the time, managed to survive. She missed the flower plucking tournament, but she found her match in the battle with the demonic cultivators and therefore had no regrets. As for the year Yanxing emerged from the mountain, he'd made a trip to Mount Chongming. He tried a few of the pre-challenges, but none of the scenes were a match for him. Finding it dull, he galloped away with his Changbao brandished, never to be seen again. In spite of all these tales, whether it was Junyu's cross-level kills, Liu Qishuang's battle of Shiling Mountains, or Yanxing's overnight breakthrough, most had only heard of them rather than witnessed them with their own eyes. This time, should Yinbiyue and Duang Chanming participate, they would not only be representing Kangya, but they would be representing Shihua Peak, the Sword Sage's disciple. This would be the first formal appearance of his disciples in the world in a century. Unlike what was written in the records, fanciful speculation of countless cultivators, this would be a head-on combat with similar young prodigies, racing down a narrow path to determine who was superior. Yinbiyue felt heavy when he thought of this. He understood that victory or defeat was no longer his own. He carried the name of the unearned master. However, Liu Qishuang had her mind on things beyond the competition. She believed that now was a perfect time for Yinbiyue to travel. Sparring with others would broaden his horizons, show him how big the world was, and get him out of the narrow box. Perhaps this experience would lessen the impact of the incident with Lo Mingchuan. Yinbiyue's innocent nature could attribute to some uncomplicated environment of his upbringing. He had either studied behind the closed doors of the academy or trained in seclusion on the peak. The outside world might be tempestuous, but one could only grow from seeing the wickedness of the human heart firsthand. Her shuti needed to grow. Liu Qishuang smiled faintly at Yinbiyue. Young people should have a sharp spirit. Yinbiyue forced himself not to grimace. If he were to add up all the years he'd spent in other transmigrations, that line would turn into old freaks should have a sharp spirit. Assuming he understood why Yinbiyue had hesitated, Junyu said in encouragement, "Of the participants this year, only one with Sue.Reads.Alottt Tempest Sword has some considerable skill. The others, of course, are no concern. Fight your best. No one can win against you. Da Shining Xiong, where's the confidence in me beaming from? I'm not you. I'm not in the late stage spirit concentration, Yin Biyue thought, baffled. The so-called Tempest Sword was a man named Zhang Shan, who was acclaimed throughout the southern continent. He had attained breakthrough at the age of 20 and hailed as the best below small ascension. He was a genius deemed by Qinglu sword sect as the most likely to attain sagehood in the next 300 years, but to Junyu all he earned was some considerable skill. If the Qinglu sword sect found out about this, they might slit their own throats en masse in a fit of pique. Yin Biyue was still immensely grateful, of course, because his elder Shushang had so many words in one go just to encourage him. Yin Biyue casted a glance to the side, and sure enough, Dong Chuangshan's eyes were practically on fire. His excitedly face exuded an energy that screamed, Da Shushang, say a few more words. Yin Biyue groaned in his head, but he was mindful to keep his words serious. Da Shushang, Shijie, please rest assured that I will do my utmost not to disgrace Shihua's Peak's reputation at this tournament, and I will look after Wu Shidi. Liu Qishuang looked astounded by his promise. Even Junyu was slightly taken aback. Yin Biyue was confused. What did I say wrong? The first half was correct. The second half, I'm Duan Changshuan's Shushang, and my cultivation is higher. It's my job to look after him? Duan, the chatterbox, saluted him and cupped his hands. Then I will be under your care, Shushang. Yin Biyue's confusion only deepened. Duan Changshuan was about to tease him for it when Junyu's own turned grim. Lo Mingchuan has come. Junyu controlled Shihua Peak's barrier. If he claimed that Lo Mingchuan was there, the latter must have been at the foot of the mountain. The atmosphere turned heavy. What is he doing here? Liu Qishuang asked with a frown. Duan Changshuan stole a glimpse at Yin Biyue for his reaction. Maybe he's here to see Si Shishang? Junyu was ready to deal a strike with his sword, Qi, if Lo Mingchuan dared take another step closer, but to everyone's surprise, Yin Biyue nodded. I shall meet him. He said in a matter-of-fact tone, Shushang, Shujie, do you have anything else you wish to discuss? Yin Biyue didn't understand why everybody's face dropped at his response. What kind of villain wouldn't face the protagonist? I have to go. Know thy enemy is always the way to assess the protagonist's limits. So I learned how to push his buttons and get my ass kicked every time, he thought. Liu Qishuang appeared grim, and Duan Changshuan looked like he was biting his tongue. In the end, Junyu made a decision for everyone. We shall go together. With as much pomp and fanfare as 4 people could manage, Lo Mingchuan was alone. They overpowered him with numbers. Junyu was halfway to the Great Ascension, while Liu Qishuang was a small ascension. Lo Mingchuan was only at the breakthrough stage. They overpowered him in cultivation level 2. Yin Biyue finally figured it out. His peers had come with him as backup because they were worried about him. Unfortunately, there was a universal truth, even more consistent than Newton's 3 laws. Those who back villains never reached a good end. He really needed to talk to his innocent peers out of their decision. When he caught the sight of Lo Mingchuan, however, he found himself at a loss for words. The man before Yin Biyue was handsome and gentle as always. However, despite the vernal breeze of late spring blowing past him, he appeared emaciated by the withered desolation of autumn. His eyes were sunken and shadow-smeared, and his white Taoist robes flapping hollowly in the wind. They'd only been apart for a month, yet Lo Mingchuan had turned haggard, a world of a difference from where they were when they met last time, when he was full of spirit and vigor. As he sensed the approaching party, he looked at Yin Biyue. His eyes were dull and his voice slightly hoarse. Yin Shidi. Lo Mingchuan thought he had sorted himself out. Somehow, when he saw Yin Biyue before him, he found himself at a loss for words. As the chief disciple of the Kangya Mountains, Lo Mingchuan handled the affairs of the sect on his master's behalf. He was the one who processed all the jade slips the other peaks transmitted to Qinghe Hall before reporting the important matters to his master. This morning, he'd seen a jade slip Junyu had sent informing Qinghe Hall that 2 disciples of Xihua Peak would be attending the flower plucking tournament. Only 2 disciples of Xihua Peak were below the small ascension state. Yinbi Yue was one of them. The mere thought of how he'd look in the dungeon made Lo Mingchuan's chest clench. Shifu, I will go to the flower plucking tournament on Mountain Chongming. You were supposed to go anyways. Why are you kneeling? I want to travel with Yin Shidi. Zheng Yangzhu fell silent, the empty main hall echoing only the drip-drop of the water clock. It was long before he waved his hand. Go on then. Lo Mingchuan performed a proper kowtow. Jinyu and Liu Qishuang showed no signs of speaking, so Duan Changshuan took a step forward. What can we do for you, Lo Shishang? He was courteous and polite. No one could fault him for the lack of etiquette. Yinbi Yue thought the critical role of Xihua Peak's diplomat rep would suit Duan Changshuan perfectly. I came here because I wish to go to the flower plucking tournament alongside Yin Shidi, Lo Mingchuan said, his eyes trained on Yinbi Yue. Lo Mingchuan was a well-spoken man. He'd once spoken eloquently at the Realm's symposium and had used his words to rally the hearts of the others during their plight in the secret realm. But right now, every word he uttered was strained. Not possible. Liu Qishuang rejected him coldly. Lo Mingchuan paled, but he didn't know what to say to advance his cause. Instead, he slashed his finger with his spiritual powers. Scarlet beads of blood trickled from the cut and dripped onto the ground. He spoke again, with careful emphasis. I, Lo Mingchuan, swear before you now that I will obtain the 1,000-leaf lotus of Ming Lake for Shudi, or else I will never advance in my cultivation. A heart's blood oath. Very few could make such a vow. Forcing one's heart blood was an enormous drain on a cultivator. Never mind the consequences of breaking the oath. This was an oath that demanded absolute action at the immense cost. The color of Liu Qishuang's face changed drastically, and even Junyu's hardened expression cracked an inch. Lo Shishang, those aren't words to be uttered carelessly. Lo Mingchuan's lips had lost all the color at this point. He stared pointedly at Yinbi Yue, a glimmer of hope shining through the cloud of despair and anguish. Shudi, do you trust me? Everyone turned their head to Yinbi Yue and saw with astonishment that he nodded. End of chapter 12. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the readings. This is the end for the preview chapters. The rest will be uploaded on my Patreon. I am enjoying it. I think it is giving kind of scum villain, the cultivation world. It's been a while since I read one of these. I've been reading a lot of the new books, which is more contained, more about arranged marriages. Last book I read on this channel was Silent Reading. Just finished that, jumped into this one. So exciting. And yeah, I'm making pretty good pace with it. By the time you probably hear this, I will be probably uploading the full novels readings on my Patreon. Thank you so much. Please give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe. Comment below your thoughts on the first few chapters. And I think this one, we got a lot of information, but we're finally getting to the good part of them traveling together. There's going to be much more interaction. It makes sense. For the most part, we were just learning about, a little bit about the OG Yinbi Yue and a bit about the martial artists, and they threw a bunch of info at us, which was quite hard to digest and confusing, but I did note them down But I'm a big believer in like, if it's important enough, then we'll know, right? Like if these characters do show up again, like they'll probably introduce us to them again. So it's fine. Subscribe and I'll see you guys in the next video.